The taxi screeched to a halt just shy of the gravel driveway I hadn't seen in over a year. I stepped out, boots still gritty with desert dust, my uniform crisp, expecting to surprise my mom with an early homecoming and collapse into my own bed for the first time in 11 months. But where my cozy white cottage with blue shutters and a porch swing once stood, there was a dog park of fenced-in, barking chaos of a dog park. 2 retrievers chased a frisbee across what used to be my living room. A woman in yoga pants shot me a dirty look as she yanked her beagle away from my duffel bag. I thought I'd gotten the address wrong until I saw a maple tree I'd carved my initials into before deploying. Its scarred trunk stood defiant in what was still my yard. Except my yard was gone. A sign read, Maple Haven Community Park, sponsored by the Homeowners Association. A plaque below it gushed about unity and shared bliss. My heart thumped louder than gunfire. When I asked a jogger what happened to the house, he shrugged and said some deadbeat hadn't paid taxes, so the HOA repurposed the land. He jogged off, oblivious that I was the so-called deadbeat. Something inside me cracked, not anger, not grief, but a bone-deep disbelief laced with exhaustion. I'd survived ambushes, led night patrols, and pulled kids from burning huts. But here, the enemy wore athleisure and wielded clipboards. I spent hours ping-ponging between city offices, each clerk more clueless than the last. Property records claimed I'd lost my land 6 months ago for tax delinquency, except I'd filed a military tax exemption before leaving. One clerk, barely looking up, told me to talk to the HOA's president, Karen Mitchell. She was apparently very committed to neighborhood standards. I found her in the community clubhouse, perched like a queen on a throne of self-awarded plaques. A framed photo labeled Visionary Leader hung behind her. She was berating a kid for putting up a skateboard ramp when I walked in. I cleared my throat and introduced myself as the owner of 214 Elm Lane. Her eyes flicked up, and she smirked a smug, practiced twist of the lips. Flipping through a folder, she said the lot was delinquent, unclaimed, and reassigned to the HOA per protocol. When I mentioned my active duty status and federal exemption, she cut me off. Maybe you should have considered your obligations before running off to play hero. The room went silent, her words hanging like smoke. I cited federal law protecting deployed service members from property loss. She offered me a lot by the dumpster, cooing, "We can work something out, sweetie," like she was tossing me scraps. I left, her smirk burned into my brain. That night, I checked into a motel, staring at the ceiling, my body home, but my mind still at war. This wasn't the desert. It was dirtier, fought on my own soil against neighbors I'd bled to protect. By morning, I called Miguel Torres, a buddy from my unit now working cyber ops for a federal agency. I'd saved his life in a firefight. He owed me. Within hours, he unearthed a tangle of forged deeds, backdated HOA minutes, and land deals tied to Karen's cousin. The HOA had faked a paper trail claiming my land was abandoned. Miguel found emails where Karen bragged about flipping that grunt's lot and keeping the neighborhood soldier-free. One message joked he'd salute and slink off if he ever returned. Rage simmered, not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sharpens focus. A lawsuit would take years, and Karen had lawyers on speed dial. I needed something sharper, louder, undeniable. I remembered Colonel James Carter, who told me to call if I ever needed help stateside. When I explained how the HOA stole my home while I was deployed, his voice went steel cold. "Send me the coordinates and a list of their assets. Quiet or loud?" I chose loud. The plan took shape. I didn't want an apology or a check. I wanted the HOA to feel what it's like to have their world upended. Miguel spent nights digging, building a dossier thick enough to choke a bureaucrat. He found records of the HOA claiming adverse possession, forging my signature, and selling my land to a shell company run by Karen's kin. Satellite images showed illegal expansions, fences, sidewalks, even a clubhouse built on protected wetlands. Karen's emails mocked veterans as troublemakers and called my house a shack. I pinned one to my motel wall beside a photo of my porch, where Mom used to sip lemonade in her rocking chair. I wondered if they'd burned it or dumped it. Either way, they'd stolen more than land, they'd stolen memory. Next, I met Judge Sarah Bowman at the courthouse, a former JAG officer who knew my unit and despised civilian scams against soldiers. I laid out Miguel's evidence, forged documents, zoning violations, emails. She called it a criminal masterpiece and warned that, despite the proof, the HOA's money and connections could stall a lawsuit for years. When I asked about federal seizure for investigation, her eyes gleamed. If it's tied to public service abuse or security, she said, it's possible. I left and called Colonel Carter. He proposed a military training exercise on disputed land, framed as urban conflict readiness. Within a day, he secured approval for Operation Homefront, a weekend-long op by the 212th Tactical Battalion. My lot and surrounding HOA properties would become a simulation zone. It was legal, audacious, and perfect. Karen had no clue her next meeting would be crashed by Humvees. Miguel and I mapped every illicit HOA structure to dog park, clubhouse, even Karen's prized tulip garden. Military logistics planned vehicle routes and landing zones. 3 days later, everything was set. I spent my last motel night staring at photos of my house, remembering Mom laughing as we painted the shutters. That land was my roots, and they tried to rip it out. Now I was rewriting the story. At dawn, Willow Haven woke to diesel roars. Humvees rolled past manicured lawns, soldiers staked tents in the dog park, and a black hawk buzzed the yoga garden. Residents gaped in pajamas, clutching mugs. Karen stormed out in a silk robe, holding a cup that read Maple Haven's finest. Her jaw dropped as engineers turned her clubhouse into a command post. She charged an officer, waving her mug like a scepter, but he handed her a packet federal orders for a land investigation and temporary occupation. Her face turned beet red as she screamed about sovereignty. No one cared. I pulled up in an unmarked SUV, watching her spot me. You did this, she hissed, storming over. I nodded. That land you stole? It's mine again, inch by inch. She sputtered, claiming HOA rights, but I asked when she last checked her property lines. She froze. Soldiers cordoned off the clubhouse, pool, and garden, all built on stolen or unpermitted land. Karen tried locking herself in the clubhouse, but the county provided keys. Her wine fridge became a cooler for MREs, her living room a map room. Residents panicked, some waving pizza box protest signs, others calling news vans. A few tried challenging the operation's legality, but backed off when shown their own zoning violations. An elderly couple brought me coffee, confessing they'd hated Karen's fines for years. They shared photos of my old house, offering to testify. I thanked them, feeling the tide turn. By noon, media swarmed. Karen's press conference flopped as cameras caught military tape around her precious sign. She ranted about government overreach, but cracked when asked why a veteran's home was razed. Her meltdown aired by evening, going viral with hashtags like Justice for SGT Collins and Karen Crumbles. Miguel traced 5 more fraudulent land deals in the HOA, and Karen's cousin faced IRS probes. A red sign went up, Federal Training Ground, restricted access. Karen's empire was occupied, her tulips trampled by boots. They too turned Maple Haven into a fortress. Soldiers drilled past stunned residents, drones mapped the land, and Karen's kitchen hosted briefings. Checkpoints blocked her allies. Inside the command post, I reviewed documents with a DoD officer, confirming my ownership and the HOA's crimes. They'd bulldozed my house without permits, paid by Karen's accounts. Out front, Karen tried rallying her board with a megaphone, but neighbors booed. An officer slapped a federal audit notice on her table, dissolving the HOA. Cheers erupted. Reporters mobbed her, demanding answers. She babbled legalese, but the narrative was set. She was the villain, I was the avenger. Miguel sent the knockout, leaked footage of Karen mocking soldiers, laughing about my house's destruction, and bragging about untouchable fraud. I sent it to the press with one line, I'm home. It exploded online, sparking calls for her arrest and veteran support. The VA condemned her, and civil rights groups offered legal aid. Karen's allies fled, her cousin was subpoenaed, and her contractor snitched. 11 homes, including hers, faced relocation notices. Residents scrambled, some packing, others crying. Karen's house became a federal review hub, her files exposing years of embezzlement and shredded complaints. At dusk, I stood where my living room once was. Soldiers had marked the foundation, clearing space to rebuild. I thanked them, their salutes heavy with shared stories of homefront betrayals. Judge Bowman dissolved the HOA permanently, stripping Karen's title. She was done her power, her legacy, ash. That night, I slept soundly, knowing justice was close. Weeks later, rebuilding began. The VA and donations funded it, aiming to restore my home exactly. Neighbors brought food, contractors, and apologies for past silence. Karen fled town, her car stuffed with boxes, her name mud. Maple Haven Healed Kids played freely, yards bloomed chaotically. A new civic group formed, with a Collins clause protecting soldiers. I drove the first nail into the porch frame where Mom's swing would hang. The sound was creation, not destruction. They stole my home while I fought for theirs, so I returned, reclaimed it, and dismantled their world one nail, one truth, one soldier at a time.